Welcome back to the Garden Hutch. Today we'll discuss week 3 of 2023. Let's get going. Well, week 3 here on the homestead was probably much like it was in your area. It was warmer than usual and relatively dry. We did get 1 day worth of rain, and it was just enough to keep the moisture in the beds to a level where we didn't have to water. But going forward, since it is so close to planting time, because we'll start our spring planting. We've already got some things in the ground, but we'll start our true spring planting here probably the end of February or so, and we'll get into more of our prep for that here in a minute. But one of the ideas that we have is we want to make sure that we keep that moisture level in the beds from this point all the way through the year, just to make sure the beds don't dry out and have an adverse effect on the microbes. On just a weather note real fast here, going into week 4 of 2023, in our area where we could get, I think it's like 1 to 3 inches of snow. I feel bad for the weatherman. They never really know what's going on. So we could get no snow, or it could drop a foot. Who knows? It's Arkansas. But I just wanted to throw that out there because snow is a great way to get some extra moisture into your beds. So what we're going to do here is, in a minute, I'm going to show you kind of how we set up our row covers. I went ahead and took some of the plastic off so we could look inside. But I was debating on whether or not I wanted to keep the row covers up and try to get the plants germinating, or if I wanted to go ahead and let the snow fall so it would melt through, and that'll put the germination on the seeds off about 10 days or so. What I've elected to do is just let the snow hit the beds. I do think, especially in the top garden where we're going to have our carrots and our radishes, and then our early spring lettuce gardens, it's more beneficial for us to start the plants and move them in and out of the greenhouses until maybe the beginning of February. It's more beneficial for us to do that than it is to do the opposite and leave the row covers up and prevent the moisture from getting in there and watering by hand. So let's start real fast by looking at how we set up our row covers. So I was just coming out here to take all this off so we could let the snow tomorrow kind of fall into the beds. If you get 1 to 2 inches of snow in these beds, that's going to add quite a bit of moisture to them, so that's going to work out well. What we did was we just went to our local hardware store. We got some of this water pipe. We got 100 foot in case we want to end up doing some of the pallet beds down there in the fall or next spring or something. If we just decide to rotate, I'd like to have the idea. All we did was we just got the 1/2 inch water pipe, and we got dowel rods to put in the soil. The only reason we did the dowel rods is we want to make sure that the concept works out before, that we don't have to get a bigger gauge or anything. If this works out in the fall, I'll buy rebar and make it more of a permanent. But for you who watch the channel, I'm not real big on doing anything permanent until I've had at least a year to sort of make sure that it works the way that I want. We also set it up, I'll show this. I gave about 1 inch here on the side, and the way that we do it is we take these little bamboo pieces, and as we put the row covers over, I just tuck the bamboo there in the side, and all that does is give it a little extra area for the wind not to be able to come in. We did the same thing here on the carrot row. You can see I left the plastic there to kind of give you an idea. All this is, we kind of went the cheap route to see if it would work, and so far it's worked out pretty well. But this is a 4 mil plastic that we found. Now you could get the 4 mil plastic that they have specifically for row covers, and the same amount of it was about 3 times as much. We found this one as a drop cloth for protecting against paint. So, kind of take that for what it's worth. But for us, this was the easier way to go. We just kind of wanted to see if it really helps out, if it gives us a big head start. And if so, then we may upgrade next year into, maybe a more permanent plastic, maybe even go up on the mill a little bit. But on the research I did, you want to try to get at least 2 or higher. The higher you can get, the better. We found the 4, so we kind of stuck it out with that. The concept that we're going to use the hoop houses for predominantly, though, is we are not planting anything that is going to be super temperature sensitive. We're not doing this so that, you know, we can grow tomatoes in, you know, January or whatever. I don't even know if you could do that here as cold as it gets. The reason we're doing it is things like radishes, carrots, beets, those types of winter or cold weather, I guess is a better way to put it, cold weather crops, they germinate much faster if you can cover them. So that kind of what we were talking about earlier is if you cover them, of course, it's going to increase the temperature underneath the row covers. As you do that, it's going to encourage the seeds to germinate, which is kind of ironic because right now, you know, if they were germinated, I'd have to make the decision. Actually, it probably wouldn't even be a decision. I would probably have to cover them for the snow and then take them off and then kind of miss out on getting that moisture into the beds. So I just wanted to throw this out here as something we got done. We're really excited to see how it works. It's the 3rd week of the year, so going into February, that's kind of our target date. We have a lot of the plants started already that we plan on putting in the rows. Now on these 2 beds, this one here and that one there, this is where our leaf lettuces are going to go. I do want to stipulate that we will use the row covers if it drops below 25 degrees. I will come out, put it in, tuck the bamboo in for that evening just to make sure that our lettuce doesn't get, you know, bit on the tips or anything. But lettuce is pretty hardy. It can handle, you know, down to like 20 or so. But if you have the ability to cover them, it seems like you might as well go ahead and take advantage of that, right? Well, speaking of, let's take a look in the greenhouse here and we'll go over a few things concerning the plants that were started and sort of our rotation from inside to outside. All right, so these are the lettuce plants that we started roughly 2 weeks ago. You can see they're kind of starting to get their true leaves on them. They'll be ready to go in the ground right at the turn of the month. So right there around, you know, end of January, early February, these things will go in the rows we have established with the covers, you know, just in case we get like a deep frost or something. And over here we started some onions. We're gonna probably have these. I'm trying something new with our bulb onions. When I put them in here, I did them really shallow and I want to establish the long roots. That way, whenever I transplant them, I already have the tops established early in the year, and I'm gonna see if I can't get them a little bigger. Our onions last year were fantastic. We got a lot of them, but they simply weren't as big as I wanted. So I'm trying a few different things this year. I also planted some directly in the ground. So we're gonna have, you know, the 2 to compare each other to. And then over here, we have beets that we started. Now, beets, I like to do them this way this year because last year we got quite a few of them, but their germination rates are so much different from seed to seed. There was one I wanted to show. Oh, it's right here. So you can see how established this one is. And then the one back there just came up last night. So, you know, who knows? So that brings us to the next thing I wanted to talk about in reference to our early plants and how we move them from inside to outside and that sort of thing. The way we do it is we leave them inside under the lights until they get to a point where the majority of them have started coming up. Like you can see on the beets here, almost every one of our cells has at least 3 up. Beets are a little different because, you know, they germinate really weird in my experience. And then you can see over here, you know, the onions, they're nice and established. And then of course, almost all of the lettuce cells have become established. One thing I want to point out about things like lettuce, if you're doing them this way, when we put lettuce seeds in, they're so small, you are bound and determined to get more than one, or at least I am. You may be better at it than I am, but I always get more than one. And so I have a lot of them that germinate. So what I like to do is I take them down to just 2 seeds, or to just, 2 plants in each cell. And the way I determine which ones I take out is I just leave the ones with the fattest stalk in there, and the ones with the thinnest stalks I remove. And I take it down to like 2 plants, or if there's just one obvious dominant plant, I'll take it down to, you know, a single plant. The reason that I do it this way is because whenever you plant, especially this Butter Crunch and the black seeded Simpson leaf lettuce, they do well whenever there's 1 or 2 plants close together. They don't really crowd each other out. You're still going to get quite a bit of them, and it gives you a better chance of success early in the year, just in case you have like a dip in temperature or whatever. It may take one out and leave the other. Also, when it gets cold, the more dense the plants are, the less the bottoms of them get frostbitten. So that's another thing to consider during this time of year. But the way that we handle this is we leave them inside until the majority of them have come up. We don't wait for the true leaves or anything. We'll bring them outside in the greenhouse. As long as the weather will be above 34 degrees, we will leave the plants in the greenhouse overnight. And this helps acclimate these plants to the, the temperatures they're going to have outside. The inside of the greenhouse will remain, a bit warmer than that. But what I do sometimes is I'll leave these flaps up, especially whenever we're getting closer to time to put them in the ground. That way they can experience a true, 33, 34 degree night, so that they don't have any kind of shock or anything whenever they're actually transplanted into the ground. So if it drops below 34 and they're like this, or like the lettuce plants, I will take them inside. Now, if we don't have the opportunity and we get like a nice fully fledged beet plant or lettuce plant, or once the onions get a little bit bigger than this, I will no longer take them inside. If they're not in the ground yet, I will leave them out here unless it gets below 25 degrees. Again, we don't plant anything here on the homestead before June 1st that we have to worry about freezing. So as a general rule of thumb, the idea that we try to apply to it is if it's a winter or cool weather crop, if it's in an early stage, we like to take it in if it's going to drop below 34. If it's in a later stage with its true leaves and it has some girth to its actual stalk, we will not take it in unless it gets below 25. Just one thing I wanted to add here on the greenhouse. I do have a video coming up. I've been requested it by people in the comment section. We appreciate all you folks dropping comments, by the way. It really helps us out. If you're enjoying this, give us a like while I'm at it. But anyway, we have a video coming up. I believe it's going to be the first week of March. And we are going to kind of start from the very beginning, how we create our own potting soil here on the homestead to use. Very cheap, and it works really well. And we're going to go all the way through. I'm just going to do a weekly update on what we're doing in the actual greenhouse or indoors to get ready for the spring. And we'll walk you step by step through when you need to bring the plants in, when you need to take them out, good ways to prevent your plants from getting too leggy, and also when is a good idea to put the cold weather crops in the ground. One more thing I wanted to add to this week's vlog are chickens. Now, throughout most of the country, eggs have gotten crazy expensive. And one of the things I took note of this past week while I was at the hardware store, building materials are substantially cheaper than they were at this point last year. And I mean, in our area anyway, it's about a third of the price for lumber and such as it was. So that's something to consider. If you feel like that, eggs are too expensive and you want to get in the hobby of raising chickens, now is a great time to do it. At least here in Zone 7B, chickens will be coming into your local ranch stores and that sort of stuff, probably end of January. If you live in somewhere they're not quite available yet, but you have the means to keep them warm, you can order them online and hatch your own, or they'll even come hatched into your local post office, and the post office will call you when the live chickens get there and you can just run down and pick them up. I only say this because here in our area, eggs have gotten about $5 or so a dozen. Some places you can get them for $4. And because of that, a lot of families just simply can't afford it, with inflation in other areas of life and that sort of thing. So if, chickens are something you've been thinking about, this year is a great time to get into them. The one thing I would caution is these things happen to be cyclical, so they'll be expensive this year. Next year, they might be back down to $1 a dozen. So you never know. So I wouldn't invest too much money and try to get rich off of eggs, because I just simply don't believe you'll ever be able to do that. But during times like this, you can take advantage of circumstances and kind of get into the hobby and be able to recoup your original investment. So I just wanted to throw this in here as something for you folks who have been considering chickens to think about. I can't believe week 3 is over already. 2023 is moving by super fast. Before we know it, it's going to be time to be planting. So I appreciate everyone, as always, that's made it here till the end. Until next time, I hope everyone takes care of themselves. Peace.